Greetings, Internet. My name is Insane Ian. I am a comedy musician and nerdcore hip-hop artist. It basically means I do songs about video games, comic books, and other pop culture things. And I am here to talk about my favorite game of all time. It's a little game called Snatcher. Now, to the uninitiated, Snatcher is a cyberpunk graphic adventure game made by Konami and released in America on the Sega CD. It was originally released in Japan on the PC 8801 and the MSX2, and then later ported to the PC Engine, which was the Japanese version of the TurboGrafx 16. It was released on their CD system there before it was brought to America. But the main thing that everybody should know about this game is that it was written and directed by Hideo Kojima, who is the guy who does the Metal Gear Solid series. He had done the first two Metal Gear games on the MSX2 previously to this, hadn't gotten to the Solid yet because the Sega CD predated the PS1, and that's how time works. But basically, this was the game that Hideo Kojima did that kind of gave everybody the impression that I think this guy really wants to do movies more than games, but makes basically interactive movies with a lot more gameplay than your David Cages of the world. But yeah, this game is one of those games that I remember playing as a kid, and it was kind of really the first game that I played that gave me the idea that games could be a whole lot more than do this task and get a high score. It was the first game that I played that had kind of a more impressive storyline and showed that games could really be a vehicle for telling expansive, huge stories. And, you know, Hideo Kojima kind of is like the progenitor to me of that style of gameplay. Now, this game doesn't play like any of the other games that he's made. It's not a delivery sim like Death Stranding, and it's not a military action game like the Metal Gear series, and it's not giant mechs like Zone of the Enders. All of these games are fantastic. This is more kind of a visual novel game, almost. It's a graphic adventure that you have a static image on the screen. Occasionally it gets animated, and there are cutscenes in between certain elements of the story, obviously, to tell that, but it's not really a point-and-click adventure. You just have the image, and below that, some things to select to do in that area that you're in. You have move, you have look, you have investigate, ask, do something, use your possessions, what have you. And the gameplay is done that way. Now, the game itself is set in the mid-21st century, 50 years after a biological weapon known as Lucifer Alpha kills much of the world's population. And it takes place in this area called Neo-Kobe City, which is kind of this Japanese metropolis set on an artificial island in Eastern Asia. And the whole point of the overarching storyline is that there's these things called Snatchers that are kidnapping humans, killing them, and then taking their identity. And you play Gillian Seed, who is an amnesiac who doesn't know anything about his past. He's estranged from his wife Jamie. But the only thing that he knows about his past is that it has something to do with Snatchers. So he joins this task force called Junker in order to fight the Snatchers, learn more about the mystery of his life, and basically solve what is going on with the Snatchers taking over things. In essence, and in a sense, it basically is a combination of Blade Runner and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and a little bit of Terminator thrown in because the designs of the Snatchers kind of look like the T-800 exoskeleton. So you've got these biomechanical android things taking people's identities, and you are working your way through kind of almost an open world game. You can kind of go anywhere once you discover where these locations are after talking to people on the street, talking to your informants, talking to the people who are in your office and getting what missions you're supposed to be doing, and you're working your way through things. And, of course, because it's Kojima and Konami, they're referencing tons of things from Konami in the game. You have a little personal droid that works with you called Metal Gear Mark II. Yes, let's name your helper character after the Metal Gear menace of the 20th century, is what they say in the game. So it's like this little tiny Metal Gear that runs along beside you and like holds your items and gives you hints and stuff. It's an adorable little creature. But the fact that they named it after like the giant robot that you have to destroy from Kojima's other game is hilarious to me. So basically, as you join Junker and are trying to learn about your past and kind of help solve your amnesia, you find out that Jean-Jacques, one of the other, actually the only other Junker agent, is in trouble, and you go rescue him, and you come to find out that he's been killed by 2 other Snatchers. And so you're trying to work your way through this mystery, through the people that you know who can inform you about these things, people who are on the situations. Jean-Jacques' daughter gives you information about where he was going and stuff like that. And it's basically a mystery game where you're trying to piece things together. But the overarching storyline that tells you about what these events are and that leads you to all these things uncovers the bigger mystery of the entire Snatcher menace. There's so much influence from films into this game that just makes it feel like itself a film. The cutscenes are beautifully animated, and again, this was a port of a game that they brought in from Japan, and they kind of toned it down a little bit for Western audiences. It's a little bit more violent and sexually themed in the Japanese version. But, you know, they toned that down for American audiences. The violence they didn't tone down. This was one of the first M-rated games after the whole, you know, ESRB trial with Joe Lieberman once Night Trap and Mortal Kombat came out, and they slapped ratings on those. That was the whole controversy with games getting ratings and everything. This was the first M-rated game to make it over to here from Japan, and that's what made me want to play it as a kid. I was in high school. I was working at Babbage's at the time, and I was like, this game looks amazing. It looks mature and violent, and I'm 15 years old. I'm mature. Yeah, I wanted to play this game. And, you know, this was the whole reason I got the Sega CD system. And the storytelling elements of the game kind of superseded all that violence and titillation that was in the game, and, you know, made me realize that these are just storytelling elements that they use to kind of push the thing forward. The game definitely wears its influences on its sleeve. You come across this bounty hunter in the game named Random Hajeel, who's also hunting Snatchers. And Random Hajeel just looks like the anime version of Roy Batty from Blade Runner. You know, and there's all of these elements to it, but it's like when you learn more about Random Hajeel and who he actually is in the story. I don't want to spoil any elements of the game. Not that it's going to be easy for you to play this game yourself. This is one of those things that has to be experienced, so I'm not going to get too much into the details of what happens in the game. But suffice it to say, it is definitely one that's worth playing. They did release the game, the PC Engine version of the game, on the TurboGrafx 16 Mini that just came out. Unfortunately, because it was the PC Engine version, it's all in Japanese, and since this is a very text-heavy game, unless you can read Japanese characters, you're not going to get very far in it. So far, the only English version of the game was the Sega CD. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't emulation versions of the game available that one could find illicitly, but I don't recommend doing that, but it is a thing that exists on the internet. I still have my Sega CD copy, and I try to play that game at least once a year because it is my favorite game of all time. And it's not the gameplay so much that makes it my favorite, but the storyline itself. One of the things that the Sega CD version did differently than the Japanese predecessors, and again, after it came out on Sega CD, it was ported to PS1 and Sega Saturn, but again, that was only in Japan. The Sega CD version is the only version translated into English and released in the West. But the thing that they added to the Sega CD version was it wasn't just the text elements that were on the screen that had you searching for clues and talking to people, but occasionally they would have shooting sections where you had the little light gun from Lethal Enforcers, another Konami release that they put out before this. The gun was called the Justifier. And you had elements where you had to shoot things on the screen in order to advance, these little combat sections to kind of spice up the gameplay a little bit. And so far as I understand, only the American release has that. I don't think they put that back into the PS1 and Sega Saturn version, although I could be mistaken here. But so far, for a lot of people, the Sega CD version is kind of the best version because it has those gameplay elements. Some of the unnecessary sexual scenes have been toned down or completely removed. There is a code to kind of like beef up the violence a little bit in the game, but overall, you're still getting the main storyline and you're still getting all of that plot and really seeing how this is like a precursor for a lot of the themes that Hideo Kojima like kind of utilizes in his games later. A lot of people said that Snatcher foreshadowed his use of science fiction to explore philosophy, sex, and the human condition in the way that he does in the Metal Gear games. This one kind of does this a little bit more concisely. And that is partially to do with what he wrote in the game originally, and also partially to do with how this work was translated as well. But I'm gushing so much about a game without actually talking too much about the game because I don't want to reveal too many things about it. The gameplay itself, like I said, is very basic. You're selecting the things on the screen to talk to people to get it to kind of like build up clues. They've tried, people have wanted this game to be ported again to America for like the DS or the 3DS in the way that the Phoenix Wright games were brought over here. And, the way that you're solving clues and kind of doing a visual novel thing there, but there's no point-and-click elements to it, so you're not like choosing things on the screen to search through, you're just actually following the text clues as you select the options on the screen, and everything is kind of branching in these different dialogue trees and different options to search through, and it becomes very involved, and you basically really have to solve the clues in order to advance the storyline and get further and kind of solve the mystery. And it's really the mystery of the game that makes it so exciting for me. And as I said before, this was really the first time that I had seen a game that kind of really was heavy on the plot. It was the plot that drove the story forward. It wasn't, hey, let's just get to the next level and let's beat up this boss here and kind of advance this way. This had your main storyline kind of like be involved, and the storyline evolved as you were playing the game. And it was really the first time I'd played a game, especially at that young age, that kind of like made me realize that games could be something so much more. It was this form of entertainment that was this interactive form of entertainment, but also had its own story to tell and had its own ideas about the world and what the world could be and what they were trying to say about this particular world that kind of seemed like so much further beyond what we expected games to do. And that's why, it's my favorite game and why I love games in general, because of what this game made me feel about games and about this game in particular. I don't know if I'm talking in circles or anything like that. I'm just kind of like gushing over how much I enjoy this game, and that's kind of, what they wanted me to do for this. So that's fine. Yeah, that's kind of all I'm gonna say about Snatcher. It's worth seeking out. I have a copy of it for Sega CD because I got it when the game came out. Because it wasn't released in the West, other than Sega CD, if you want to own an actual copy of the game, it's expensive. It usually runs between $600 to $800. for an actual physical copy of the Sega CD game because that's the only way it was released in America. The Japanese versions are obviously a little cheaper, but also they're in Japanese, and unless you can read that, it's not going to do you any good. We've been begging Konami for years to re-release the game, and they did. The PC Engine on the TurboGrafx Mini, it's still in Japanese. So maybe they'll release it again eventually. Maybe Hideo Kojima will get the rights back to it and he'll do a version of it. I don't know if any of that's going to happen, but we can dream, can't we? Anyway, if you get a chance to seek out a version of the game that's playable, I highly recommend that you do. It is a throwback to a time when games were simpler, but plots began expanding. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to me babble about this wonderful, wonderful piece of media. And, there's long plays on YouTube of people playing through the game, so you can check those out in case you don't want to play through it yourself and you want to watch people do that. That's a thing that people do now. That's why Twitch is popular. Anyway, my name is Insane Ian. You can find my stuff online, insaneian.bandcamp.com. I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/insaneian. I've done podcasts and stuff and about things, and I'm running out of words now, so I'm going to stop talking. Thank you. Oh, and happy gaming!